Hi, all. Thank you for attending my session on learning from our mistakes, a session that will focus predominantly on the what, why, and how of mistake literacy. I'm Zach Cohen, the middle school director at St. Francis here in Louisville, Kentucky, a non denominational progressive independent school. I'm also a consultant and blogger for the Core Collaborative, and if you'd like to connect with me or follow me, I can be reached at my Twitter handle. When speaking with a group of students, Barack Obama advised them not to let their failures define them, but rather to learn from them. The actress and activist Mary Tyler Moore once suggested that one should take chances and make mistakes. That's how you grow. Teddy Roosevelt reminds us that the only man who never makes a mistake is a man who never does anything. It seemed that public facing figures across the past century appreciate the role the mistake making can play in the learning process, even going so far as to recognize its inevitability in a life well lived. I'd imagine that if I were to conduct a quick straw poll right now, we'd overwhelmingly agree with this sentiment, regardless of our age, family background, or nationality. This is because learning from mistakes is both ancient and perennial, transcending time, culture, and place. Consider the fact that there's no barrier for entry. People living in any time period at any socioeconomic level have all had equal access to mistakes. And yet, in spite of its universality, it's also one of the most untapped and underutilized learning resources at our disposal. Largely, this is because we don't yet know how people actually learn from their mistakes. And because we don't know how people learn from their mistakes, we too often find ourselves fearful of them. This fear is prevalent enough that there's even a medical nomenclature for it, aticophobia. The thing is, though, we all acknowledge that some of our greatest learning has been the result of our mistakes. We've been able to reflect on what went wrong, pocket those lessons, and move forward with a greater confidence. On the other hand, there have been times when we've made a mistake, grown frustrated, and taken nothing away from the experience. So, what actually accounts for this difference? Why is it that sometimes we learn and sometimes we stagnate or even regress? Well, that's what I want to speak about today. Before we get into it, there are going to be a couple of ways to engage with this presentation. The first way to engage will be on Twitter using the mistake literacy hashtag. So, hashtag mistake literacy. The second would be by simply adding comments or clarifying questions using the chat feature. With that, let's dive into today's learning. Mistake literacy is a mindset consistent of a suite of dispositions and non cognitive skills that work in tandem to optimize learning by building individuals' capacity and capability to recognize, react to, and repair their mistakes. Mistake literacy is about growing one's understanding of mistake making, creating the conditions for individuals to meaningfully engage with their mistakes, and equipping individuals with the competencies to learn from their mistakes. In short, mistake literacy aims to pave the way for future learning to occur by counteracting our tendency to ignore, deny, downplay, and outright disavow our mistakes. Plenty of research has sought to account for these maladaptive responses towards mistake making by seeking ways to eradicate them entirely. However, preventing future mistakes from occurring is not only unfeasible, it's undesirable. Mistakes are the atomic unit of learning. Without mistakes, future learning would cease. Mistakes illuminate the horizons of one's knowledge and lend a meaningful sense of the discrepancy between what is known and what is left to be known. Mistakes sharpen students' self monitoring, judgments, and skills, and stimulate questions about why their performance was not correct, which then promotes rethinking learning strategies. Mistakes are foundational and fundamental to the learning process. They aren't merely instructive, they are the key that might help to unlock the deep nature of a mechanism as complex as learning. Existing research tells us how to minimize mistakes and provides us with lessons on how to avoid such an outcome, but mistake making is so unavoidably human that we shouldn't go through our day to day lives trying to avoid mistakes. The issue at hand really should not be whether we can eradicate mistake making. Instead, we should seek to understand how learning can be something sought from the mistake making process rather than something denied. What's fascinating is that our bodies agree. The phenomenon of post error slowing, or PES, refers to the tendency of participants to slow down on a current trial after having committed an error on a previous trial. This is a biological response to mistake making, not one that the participant is conscious of. In other words, when engaging in an activity that we've done erroneously before, our bodies acknowledge this and delay successive actions. Moreover, in a 2018 study, neuroscientists at Caltech discovered that mistakes set off an almost instantaneous chain reaction of productive brain activity. Researchers found that before one is even cognizant of their error, one set of neurons, called error neurons, begin to fire. In rapid succession, the brain of a person making an error lights up with the kind of activity that encodes information more deeply. Our bodies want us to learn from our mistakes. Our conscious mind, on the other hand, does not. Consider that the baseball player who strikes out 200 times in a season is not destined to lead the league in home runs the following season. That player may have had 200 opportunities to learn from their mistakes for their body to slow down and realize and allow them the space to examine and self evaluate, and yet that player may never learn to lay off that 2-2 slider. You see, in spite of our biology, we are not culturally comfortable making mistakes. We have been socialized and in turn have internalized mistakes as being something to avoid. In fact, people on the whole prefer less optimal outcomes so long as it allows them to avoid making a mistake. A 2017 study found that even when study participants' attention was drawn to the benefits of errorful generation, study participants continued to prioritize less effective strategies that did not involve mistake making. This adverse response to mistake making would seem to suggest that people would prefer not to dip their toes in the murky waters of errorful learning, even if error generation actually improves learning outcomes. In a 2019 study, medical students reported powerful emotional responses and reactions to even thinking about committing errors. They used words like scared, guilty, embarrassed, fear, mad at myself, extraordinarily awful, frightening, and discouraging. Not one medical student who participated in the study thought about mistakes as being an opportunity to learn. Now, mind you, these weren't residents, but students. They weren't even interacting with patients. If they can't learn from mistakes when in school, when will they learn from their mistakes? It's kind of unnerving, actually, to think about that. According to the World Bank, many Americans are starting to view mistakes in much the same way as these medical students. American adults who see good opportunities to start a business but indicate that fear of failure would prevent them from doing so has been increasing for the past 2 decades. It is approaching, in fact, the world median in spite of the US having long prided itself on being a land of the intrepid. Like medical students, this particular brand of mistake anxiety isn't tied to anything concrete. It's really more of an existential dread of mistake making. We have to acknowledge that though this fear of mistakes is real, researchers have found that for some people, the prospect of making a mistake activates the same center of the brain as when people see snakes or spiders. The thing is, the fear isn't just holding us back in the present, it's actually holding back our students from being future ready learners. Just as the shifting demands of the technological revolution set the stage for the current model of schooling, the technological advances of today's fourth industrial revolution have begun to transform the sociocultural context in which learning occurs. Technologies now lie at the heart of how people communicate, consume information, and organize their lives. Learning in such a technology-rich environment has become seamless, meaning learners can integrate their experience across various dimensions, including formal and informal learning contexts, individual and social learning, and the physical world and cyberspace. In a learning environment defined by integrated on demand information, the information level outside the classroom is now far higher than the information level inside the classroom. Thus, learners are now empowered to decide where, when, and how they will learn to meet their own learning needs. For schools to remain relevant, they will need to account for this increasingly democratized and personalized learning model. As B.F. Skinner once wrote, we cannot prepare young people for one kind of life in institutions organized on quite different principles. So, what kind of life should schools be preparing students for? Well, as technology grows in sophistication, almost every job is being reinvented. While prognostications on the threat of automation might be more science fiction than reality, automation will apparently only replace about 5% of jobs. Nearly 45% of all jobs could be automated by adapting currently demonstrated technologies. In other words, 45% of the job that I do as a middle school principal could soon enough be automated. What this means is that for the students of today to be prepared for the workforce of tomorrow, schools will need to identify and teach to the 55% of skills that are uniquely human. These skills, whatever they are, will need to complement those of artificial intelligence. But given the breakneck speed of workplace change, even more importantly, these uniquely human skills will need to be transferable and enduring across time and career. This point is made especially resonant when one considers that the projected rise in life expectancy will lead to us potentially having to save for what could be an additional 80 years of life. Now, now saving for an additional 80 years of life is really not an option for many. So it follows that a portion of those 80 years will be spent working. By adding decades to one's work life, it is perfectly plausible, even likely, that people will have multiple careers. Simply, the students of today and the workforce of tomorrow will require skills that not only complement the changing capabilities of AI, but also retain their relevance across multiple career changes. So, beyond just the 55% of skills that are uniquely human, the question becomes what skills are uniquely human and transferable and enduring? In places as geographically diverse as Singapore, Australia, New Zealand, Finland, Scotland, education is being rethought to answer this question. These school systems are pioneering cutting edge reforms that can help learners to remain viable through the vicissitudes of multiple sustained periods of discontinuity. To do so, these school systems have given a central role to non cognitive skills and dispositional competencies. Whereas historically, educational quality has been defined by the promotion and assessment of cognitive curricular aspirations, these schools have chosen to depart from the conventional, often exclusive treatment of cognitively focused instructional principles to help students be prepared to face the 21st century through the attainment of those skills and competencies that cannot be automated. This shift in emphasis being placed on non cognitive and dispositional skills is being seen in the workplace as well. A 2016 study from the World Economic Forum found that between 2016 and 2030, time spent by workers applying manual labor and basic cognitive skills will decrease by 16%, whereas the use of non cognitive skills such as critical thinking and dispositional competencies such as empathy will increase by 26%. A LinkedIn study found that 57% of senior leaders identified soft skills such as creativity, persuasion, collaboration, adaptability, and time management to be more valuable to the workplace than hard skills. In other words, there is a uniquely human quality to soft skills, which not only cannot be replicated by artificial intelligence, but are evidently enduring over time and transferable from one workplace to the next. Of course, some soft skills are invariably more valuable to tomorrow's workforce than others. Therefore, it's important for us to ask what are the optimal suite of skills and competencies to prepare learners for the emerging future? Now, there's no shortage to answers for this question. There's John Cow, who believes that the intended outcome of teaching and learning should be anchored to the discrete competencies that comprise the entrepreneurial spirit. There's Mike Gorman, who champions a suite of skills that collectively contribute to the development of an inventor's mindset. Guy Claxton advocates for built-in learner power, which is founded on the 4 Rs, whereas Yuval Noah Harari argues in favor of the 4 Cs. On the other hand, Kai-Fu Lee advocates for schools to place an increased emphasis on social emotional learning as part of a response to the growing influence of AI, a theory that exists in contrast to that of connectivism, which venerates the influence of AI and the increasing complexity of knowledge in a network world. Irrespective of the push and pull, the value of each of these models is inarguable. All of these models better prepare learners for the realities of the 21st century than the current model of schooling. And yet, given the decline in half-life of job-related skills, the half-life of such skills is now estimated to be about 5 years. These more sort of skill-oriented models will be rendered obsolete as quickly as they can be learned. So we need to focus less on developing a skill set and more on developing a mindset that will allow people to confidently learn and unlearn job-related skills. In an age widely defined by change and uncertainty, one thing is for sure: people will make mistakes. And a recent study out of McKinsey agrees. McKinsey found that in a labor market that is more automated, digital, and dynamic, all citizens will benefit from having a set of foundational skills that help them fulfill three criteria. Of these three criteria, the ability to continually adapt to new ways of working is chief among them. Furthermore, the two skills that McKinsey found to be most closely linked with a higher likelihood of employment are adaptability and coping with uncertainty. Two skills that really foreground the importance of being able to learn from one's mistakes. To prepare students for the world that they will be entering, schools need to develop confident, independent, lifelong learners who possess the know how to recognize, react to, and repair their mistakes, a skill that is evergreen and untapped. Mistake literacy will allow us to do just that. Mistake literacy is composed of four components: growth mindset, self repair, the learner empowerment cycle, and self efficacy. Now, why do we need a system to enable people to learn from their mistakes? Well, it is not only because learning from mistakes is rare, it's also because there are some people who are simply genetically more or less predisposed to it. A system such as mistake literacy is actually intended to level the playing field. While it might come naturally to some people, learning from our mistakes does not come naturally to others. In 2007, a team of neuroscientists from Germany reported that people with a particular gene variation have greater difficulty learning from negative reinforcement than those without the gene variation. That means those with the gene variation are slow to learn from bad experiences and mistakes. Of course, genetics does not define what one is capable of. The key question is how much we believe we can do with what we are born with. If we believe our smarts or skills are pretty much set in concrete, we are going to avoid and dread mistakes because they show us that we've, well, screwed up. If we believe that with more effort we can get better and better, then we can view mistakes less harshly and as part of an overall process of growing and learning. This is why mistake literacy begins with the growth mindset. A person with a growth mindset believes intelligence, skills, and abilities are not static. They're dynamic entities that can be strengthened through experience. Students possessing a growth mindset are more likely to view challenges and failures as opportunities to improve their learning and skills. In this way, students who have a growth mindset are more likely to hold a positive perception of mistakes and mistake making. These students perceive failure as a cue to increase effort, self-monitoring, and self-instruction rather than as a deterrent. Carol Dweck found that the skills and competencies that underlie a growth mindset, those of resilience, diligence, and self-management, produce learners who embrace challenges, persist in the face of setbacks, and learn from criticism, while students with a fixed mindset gave up quickly and blamed their challenges on a lack of intelligence. The research has found that students with more of a growth mindset kept working in spite of the difficulty, recognizing that setbacks were inevitable on the road to mastery and that they could even be guideposts on their journey. These students perceived failure as a cue to increase effort, self-monitoring, and self-instruction. Simple as it sounds, a belief in the transformative power of mindset is one of the keys to maximizing one's ability to learn from mistakes. The growth mindset is foundational to growing mistake-literate learners. But the research has found that to maximize its impact, students need to be put in positions for their mindset to be actionable. So, how can we bring students' mindsets to life? Wrongness is not something we experience in the moment, but something we experience afterwards. It is not something we can experience contemporaneously to the mistake itself. Thus, the only way to learn from a mistake is to reflect upon it. By definition, there can't be any particular feeling associated with simply being wrong. Indeed, the whole reason it's possible to be wrong is that while it is happening, you are oblivious to it. So it's not until we realize that we are wrong that learning can begin. This is why the self repair process is so important. It's the first step in recognizing our mistake for what it is, a gap in our knowledge. Once we recognize a mistake, our first instinct should be to act on it. There's no sense in pretending the mistake did not occur. But acting on a mistake is not in and of itself going to guarantee learning. Action that is flippant or self flagellating is no more effective than burying one's head in the sand. The action that one takes following a mistake needs to be purposeful and deliberate. For students to maximize their learning from mistakes, they need to know where they are going, what it will look like when they get there, and where they will go next. This step of self repair is about providing students with the space and time to do just that. Self repair consists of self assessment and goal setting. Self assessment involves the learner reflecting on their mistake to facilitate consideration of what to repair. Goal setting builds on this by challenging students to identify pathways and resources so they know how to repair it. The first step in the self repair process is that of self assessment. Self assessment is, in its essence, an evaluation. It asks a learner to take stock of their perception of strengths and deficits related to the learning, with the goal being to build an awareness of what they are ready for next. Reflecting on correct and incorrect examples has been shown to be effective for learning across domains, with the effects being strongest when students have previously generated erroneous solutions themselves. This relationship stems from the fact that reflection helps students to gain a new perspective, thus clarifying what they did incorrectly and facilitating contemplation of strategies that can help to solve the problem. In other words, the influence of self assessment on learning increases when it is rooted in mistake making because this shift in perspective preempts a like shift in actions. Goal setting is the pivot point between reflection and action, the benefits of which are well documented. From the existing research, we learned that one quality of goal orientation learners that seems to stand out is their willingness to take risks and learn from their mistakes. They appear confident that nothing bad will happen to them when they fail. In all, the self repair process operationalizes the growth mindset. These students already understand one approach that does not work, that being, what led to the mistake in the first place, so they now have the chance to consider what that teaches them and what options are available. In this way, the self repair process brings students to the edges of their knowledge, which, as Jim Rickabow says, is where learning occurs. For that learning to occur, though, a choice needs to be made. Self repair positions students to make that choice. The next step is for students to be empowered to do so. The learner empowerment cycle consists of choice, motivation, and engagement, three dispositions that work recursively to develop self-directed learners who are increasingly likely to learn from their mistakes. When learners have choice, they develop feelings of autonomy. When learners feel autonomous, they are more motivated, and when motivation is acted upon, it becomes engagement. Mistake literate learners must be engaged, but the goal of mistake literacy is not to engage them. Rather, the goal is to create the conditions where an engagement becomes possible. When learning is connected to choice, the learning becomes more purposeful and relevant. And according to the research, when choice is integrated into the learning, it can increase levels of motivation, which in turn can increase student engagement. Choice is omnipresent, residing in every situation regardless of one's awareness of it. For many students, choice is oftentimes hidden. Students do not see deadlines, for instance, as a choice. The reality, though, is that the mere act of abiding by or failing to abide by a deadline is, in and of itself, a choice that students are making. Whether they realize it or not, choice is always operating in the background at the subconscious level. The purpose of the learner empowerment cycle is to bring choice to the conscious level. In doing so, students become aware of the broad array of choices at their disposal, which allows them to acknowledge the power and control they actually have over their learning. By bringing choice to the forefront of one's consciousness, it increases feelings of autonomy. Specifically, there are three kinds of choice that promote autonomy: organizational, procedural, and cognitive. Motivation is the presence of an emotional or psychological attraction to a task. Within the context of education, learner motivation refers to a student's willingness, need, desire, and compulsion to participate in and be successful in the learning process. Of course, there are multiple forms of motivation, some of which are better suited to empowering learners. According to the research, there are three types of motivation: lacking, extrinsic, and intrinsic. To empower learners, it is imperative that students are put in positions to be intrinsically motivated. Learners who are intrinsically motivated do not wait for someone else to motivate them because they have access to skills, tools, and stimuli to keep themselves going without depending on someone else to tweak their pursuit or manipulate their circumstance. Engagement occurs when students make an emotional or psychological investment in their learning. Engaged students see learning as its own reward rather than feeling a need to seek out external validation. In this way, engaged students do not look to traditional measures of success to validate their learning, but instead focus on the process. An engaged student dedicates themselves to the subject and performs with enthusiasm and care during the learning process because they attribute value to it. Even when faced with challenges, an engaged student continues to study and finds a personal value and meaning in their learning. When it comes to developing mistake literate learners, choice, motivation, and engagement do not constitute warm and fuzzy extra components of effort to improve learning. In fact, they are primary drivers in developing learners who possess the feelings of competence and confidence to learn from their mistakes. The cumulative impact of the learner empowerment cycle equips students to become increasingly autonomous in their learning and, in turn, nurture a belief that they are in control of their learning. The learner empowerment cycle is an ongoing recursive process, a virtuous cycle that produces better and better results with each pass through. As students engage in the learner empowerment cycle, they become fuller agents in their own learning and begin to develop a stronger sense that learning is within their locus of control. However, learners who leverage choice to maximize motivation and find their spark of engagement are not yet fully equipped to be mistake literate. They're on the right path, yes, but they're not yet at the final destination. The learner empowerment cycle is not the endpoint of growing mistake literate learners, but a vehicle to ready learners to be self-efficacious. Self-efficacy can be thought of as a catch-all term for students' confidence in exerting control over their learning and persistent to overcome challenges. Self-efficacy leads learners to persist in the face of challenges and continually try different strategies to overcome obstacles. The presence of self-efficacy is important for learners to stretch and grow and to move beyond present levels of skills and knowledge. According to James Gunn, students with high self-efficacy work harder, persist longer, and have fewer adverse emotional reactions when countering difficulties. Consider the free throw. A basketball player stands on a designated spot in relative proximity to the basket. There are no defenders present. Rather, would-be defenders are reduced to mere spectators. Whereas an offensive player normally has 24 seconds to shoot the ball on the foul line, time, for all intents and purposes, is suspended. The conditions dramatically favor the offensive player. In fact, they favor the offensive player by such a substantial margin that the value of making a foul shot is worth only half what it would be under normal playing conditions. And yet, irrespective of how optimal the conditions are, offensive players are still liable to miss a free throw. Conditions can only take a player so far. Learning from a mistake is really no different. Teachers, families, societal factors at large can conspire to facilitate learning, but it is ultimately dependent upon the individual to make a choice that learning is their sought-after outcome. Self-efficacy instills in students the daring and self-certainty to ignore barriers and learn from their errors. High-efficacy students possess the competence and confidence to see mistake-making as an opportunity as opposed to an obstacle. Learners who possess high levels of self-efficacy play a greater role in planning their learning paths, tracking their progress, and applying their learning. Simply put, self-efficacy breeds ownership, and when students own the learning, they become less reliant on the traditional systems and structures of schooling, instead, embracing the responsibility of taking appropriate autonomous action to understand and solve the problem themselves. When students perceive of learning as something that they own, their ability to problem solve expands beyond the limitations of school, inspiring creative, non traditional solutions. Of course, high efficacy learners haven't reached a proverbial mountaintop and now have the keys to learn from all of their mistakes from this point forward. Mistake literacy is not a once off, but a process meant to be followed every time an error occurs, as this constant application is a recursive cycle that grows stronger with each pass through. When a student with high self efficacy finds success, having learned from a mistake, it in turn strengthens their growth mindset. With effort, I can learn from my mistakes, and thus strengthens the student's commitment to mistake literacy as a whole. In this way, self efficacy is not the final step of mistake literacy, but the linchpin that links one mistake to the next. Mistake literacy empowers us to make the most of what is most natural and unavoidable to the learning process, the process itself. As based on your learning today, how might you use mistake literacy in your school? Now, in just a moment, this presentation is going to end. When it does, we'll turn this into a Q&A, and you can go ahead and use the chat feature to do so. And we can keep the conversation going by posting questions or sharing our learning using the hashtag mistake literacy on Twitter. Thanks for attending my session all.